So welcome to our first in the series of grant writing and fundraising workshops here at the City of Federal Way. These are sponsored by the Economic Development Department, so we thank them very much for providing these for the community. This first workshop is called From Idea to Impact, Crafting Grant-Ready Projects. So we will jump right in. So as I said, my name is Ariana Garfolo. I'm the Senior Grant and RFP Writer here at Collaborative Partners Initiative. So we're a women-led, women and veteran-led small business. We're based in Pierce County. And so we do grant writing, capacity building, and compliance support for a variety of nonprofit, government, and other sorts of organizations, primarily in Washington, but a bit of work all over. So we are excited to be here. I have 10 years of experience in educational environments, multiple years working on grants and coaching folks who are new to grants, folks who have been in grants for a long time, so a wide variety of things. So I'm happy to be your presenter this evening. So now that you know a bit about me, I'd like to know a bit more about all of you, just to get to know who's in the room. We have these interactive questions. You don't have to participate if you don't want, but if you have a smartphone, so if you just go to menti, menti.com. So if you just open up your internet browser, type in menti.com. There should be a little place where it asks you for a code, and then you can type in this code. I hope you can see it. It's 8853-2008. Yeah, so this first question, we're just curious, are you a small business, a nonprofit, or other? And if you don't want to do this on your phone, you can also just kind of shout out what your organization type is. I know we're all using technology all the time, and sometimes you just don't want to pull out your phone again. All right, so it looks like we have mostly small businesses. We've got 5 small businesses, 1 nonprofit, and 1 other. Okay. So next one, which I think, so yeah, this is the same code. So I think if you just scroll down, the question will appear. So now I'm curious, how many grants have you applied for? So none, 1 to 5, 5 to 10, or 10 or more. Well, I'm so glad to have a lot of folks who are newer to grants here. All right, so next question. So this is open-ended, so you can just type in, what is your role at your organization? So just what is your job title? Okay, so we've got several owners, founder, let's see, board treasurer, board of directors, director of Small Business Development Center, volunteer, and president. Cool, this is a great variety of folks. All right, well, I think we can go to the next question. Thank you all so much for responding. This is exciting. All right, we've got just one final question, and then I promise we'll move on. So I think probably none is going to be the most popular answer here, because we know that a lot of you are new to grants. So yeah, any grant reporting experience. So if you've gotten a grant and then have to sort of report on it afterwards. All right, awesome. Thank you all so much for participating. It's great to know a bit more about who is in the room. Okay, so let's jump in to our presentation. So our first step, we kind of structured this like a race. On your mark, get set, go. So first, we're going to assess your organization for grant readiness. First thing that you want to think about, so I know, as we've learned, a lot of you are newer to applying for grants. Before you even consider applying for a grant, it's good to do some prep work to think about what you're going to need in order to apply for that grant. So there's a lot of paperwork that you're going to need, and this is a helpful step because as you'll learn as you start getting more into grants, is that a lot of times it's a bit of a fire drill. You find out about a grant and then it is due in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or some sort of short time frame. And so this step can help you be ready when that grant does come available. So there are things you can do to help yourself get organized. So getting your paperwork, getting all your docs in a row is a good place to start. So depending on your organization type, I know we've got a mix of nonprofits and small businesses. Depending on your org type, you might not need all of these documents. If you're a nonprofit, maybe your mission and vision statement, your EIN letter if you're a business, or if you're a nonprofit, your 501c3 letter talking about your nonprofit status, list of your staff, list of your board of directors, if you have that, tax returns, financial statements, operating budgets. Those are going to be required to upload for most grants, and sometimes the stuff can take a while to all get together. So it's a good idea to just kind of get this all together before you get started. Staff resumes or bios, organizational charts. So I know it seems kind of basic, but this can actually be a really helpful step with applying for grants, is just making sure that you have got all of your paperwork together. And I would recommend whatever sort of file system you're using, get it all in one place so that it's really easy, for you to go in one folder on your computer and have everything in one spot. Along these same lines is knowing your numbers. So if you are applying for a grant from the state of Washington, you might need a UBI number. It's your Universal Business Identifier. You get that from the Department of Revenue. Any type of grant you're applying for will require you to have your EIN number, which is your tax number. If you're applying for a federal grant, you need a UEI number, which is different from your UBI number. So again, these are small things, but if you are in the thick of applying for a grant, can be really stressful to have to go figure out where you find all of these numbers. So another good thing to keep with all of your paperwork and keep handy. On this slide, I'll talk a bit about who you need to put a grant together. And depending on the size and the structure of your organization, it might just be you working on a grant, or ideally you've got some folks who can help support you. So I put this together of just kind of some of the different skill sets that you will need. So you're going to need someone who likes working with words, somebody who's going to be able to craft that story, craft that grant narrative for you. Somebody who likes numbers, somebody who's going to put together the grant budget and think about what your grant is actually paying for. Somebody who does data, somebody who's going to provide your organizational data, and also somebody who can do research to support the need for your grant. And then also somebody who's really detail-oriented, who can do proofreading, editing, making sure you're adhering to all the requirements, all the details. So that's kind of a lot. So ideally, you can have a small team. Hopefully, you've got some team members, some colleagues who can help you, so that you're not doing all of the grant work by yourself. But this is just an idea of the kinds of skills you might need. Now let's understand what you can use a grant for. I think that this is one of the most common questions that comes up when folks are newer to grants is, what can we use them for? So a good thing to keep in mind is that a grant that is all-purpose, that is just for general operating expenses that you can use for anything, is probably pretty rare. It's a bit of a unicorn. So in most cases, you're going to have to actually think about specifically what you need to use the grant for. What specific need do you have? So that might mean you need to remodel your building, or you need another staff member, or things like that. So it's a good thing to think about and realize that in general, you're not just going to get a grant that you can use for anything. It's going to be for a specific purpose. So to that end, it's a good idea to make a wish list of things that your organization needs. So again, this is like the pre-step before you're even applying for a grant, is just to really sit down and take some time to think about what does your organization need and what would be helpful to you. So create that wish list. Another thing that you can do is really take a good look at your budget and think about how you might potentially be able to kind of shuffle some cost around. For example, it can sometimes be harder to find grants that are able to be used for staffing. So it might be better if you can kind of make some changes in your budget so that the money for staffing is coming from your organization or your business, and then maybe the grant can be used for some other things. So I think that's an important thing to stress, is sometimes you've got to think a little bit creatively and realize that there might not be a grant for this specific need, but what if you look at your budget and think about how you can shuffle around a bit and free up some space, and then get a grant for something that you can find a grant for. And then another thing to think about too is, what needs do you have that are most impactful to your project or the community that you serve? What is going to make the biggest impact and the biggest amount of difference? So let's take a moment here to just kind of jot down a quick wish list of some things that your small business or your nonprofit needs. So just dream big, think of a wish list. You can just, jot this down on your own. I do have more pens. Does anybody need a pen who doesn't have one? Okay. So yeah, feel free to just jot this down. You're also welcome to share. There's another interactive slide, so if you want to type in any needs that your organization has, if you want to share them with the group, you can do that, or you can just jot them down on your own. So again, you're just thinking through 3 to 5 needs for your organization. Payroll, rent, and inventory replenishment. We got it. All right, we've got advertising and websites, scholarships, expanded staffing and Spanish-speaking advisors, how to structure your LLC, mannequins and training supplies for life-saving and stop the bleed classes, training supplies, payroll. Awesome. Thank you guys all for sharing. This is exciting to see a snapshot of what folks need. I'll give you a few more moments in case anybody else is still responding. All right, we've also got food, rent, utilities, medical money, rental and housing eviction prevention, money. That's always good. Well, I think that you are all in luck, because I think most of the things that you have mentioned, many of these, there would be grants available for. In particular, training, supplies, rental and housing eviction prevention. There are often grants along those lines. We've also got warehouse space, recruiting, marketing. Yeah, so this is great. So every need listed on here is pretty unique. So, folks here would be applying for a wide variety of grants, because the same grant is probably not going to fund rental and housing prevention. That would also fund advertising and websites. So you folks would be finding different grants, but all right, we've also got office equipment added here and language help. Awesome. Well, this is exciting. I think that you could all find some grants that would work for you. So thanks for sharing some of your needs. All right, so now we're going to get into some of the fun stuff. We're going to talk about how you can communicate your vision. So as we've seen, everybody has needs, everybody's organization has things that you need. And so really the key with securing grants is being able to effectively communicate why you need X, Y, and Z, and why the funder should give you money. So it's really about communicating that vision and communicating that need. So we're going to go through a few slides that will help you learn how to do that. So a good place to start is to think about developing what might be called a need summary, or perhaps an elevator pitch. So I think that what's important here to think about is to not assume that anyone reading your grant is going to know anything about you or your organization. And when I'm working with folks, I see this commonly where a lot of times folks will think, oh, well, this funder is in the same city or state or county as me, and so they probably already know everything about my organization. And so I want to encourage you to not make that assumption. And when you're thinking about writing, either for a grant or for this elevator pitch or for your needs summary, you want to think about just really spelling everything out and not assuming that who's reading your grant is going to know anything about your population that you serve, the need in your community, anything like that. So you really want to just spell everything out. And also, when you're doing this, I like to say that the word because is your friend. And so words like because or why or how, those are all going to help you. So I need this because why. So you don't just want to say, I need training for my staff. Because, like, why do you need that training? What is the reason? So this is another thing that you can, really start brainstorming about before you even get to the place of starting to apply for grants, is just think about why you need this. So we're gonna also think about keeping it short for this needs summary or elevator pitch. You want to think about how do you explain what you need in maybe 30 seconds if you're talking about it verbally, or maybe a couple of paragraphs up to a page if you're doing this in writing. Okay, so we have some handouts. Angela, do you want to hand some of these out? So I realize this is a lot of text on the screen. So Angela is going to come around and share some handouts with this text. All right, so let's go through this together. So this first one at the top of your paper, or on the screen right now if you're looking at this. So this is maybe not as great of one. So let's look at why this isn't so great. So this isn't a real organization. This is just an example. So established in 1990, IRIS is a life-saving, community-based organization serving those in need. So if somebody submits a grant and I'm looking at this, as soon as I read that first sentence, I already have multiple questions. So my first question is, what does life-saving mean? And then also, who are those in need? And I see that this happens really commonly with all organizations, is that the work that everyone is doing is amazing and great and super important, and so it can be easy to kind of use these terms and say life-saving or things like that. But the thing is that doesn't actually tell the funder anything really specific about what your work is doing, or what your business is doing, or what your nonprofit is doing. So for example, the phrase "those in need" is really vague. So you know exactly who's in need that your organization would be helping, but the person reading your grant isn't going to know that. Those in need could be folks who are unhoused. Those in need could be folks that don't speak English, that need language access. It could mean a lot of different things, right? So even though it's really clear to you, remember that the person reading it might not know, who those in need are. So as you're writing, I want you to think about those things. Anything that could be kind of vague, that's not really specific, the person reading your grant application might not understand what you mean. So again, we'll move on. IRIS breaks the cycle of poverty, providing new regenerative opportunities to members of the community's most underserved neighborhoods. So again, what does breaking the cycle of poverty mean? Like, how is the organization doing that, right? Because there could be so many different ways that you could break the cycle of poverty. You could provide education, you could provide rent support, you could provide housing support. So again, that's just kind of vague. And same with the most underserved neighborhoods. What are those neighborhoods? Who lives there? Like, what are the more specific demographics? So since its founding, IRIS has served 7,000 individuals. Who are those individuals? Are they kids? Are they adults? Are they English as second language learners? Who are they? IRIS After School provides sports engagement programming to underserved youth, reducing harmful activities and providing a positive outlet to children. So again, you might read this and think, oh, this sounds great. This sounds like such good work. And obviously it is. But you really want to try to be more specific because, again, what is sports engagement programming? Are they offering basketball? Is it soccer? Is it martial arts? Is it sports plus mentorship? It could be many different things. The after-school sports program acts as a catalyst for change, improving graduation rates and school attendance. So how does it improve graduation rates? Because previously we just read that it's sports programming. So where's the connection between, how does that improve school attendance rates? And then also this paragraph ends with funding is requested to support IRIS's scholarship program. So we don't really know anything about what is that scholarship program, what is the funding going to do, who exactly are the scholarships given to. So we have lots of questions after reading this, right? So I think, a good practice as you are newer to writing grants and getting started in this world is, give things that you write to someone and, ask them, ideally someone who's not very familiar with your organization, and say, when you read this, do you have any questions left over? Because ideally, when someone is reading your grant that you've written, you don't want them to have any questions. You want them to say, oh, I understand this completely. I'm not asking who or what or where or why or any of those things. You just want them to understand. So that can be a good, way. You don't have to necessarily, not all organizations have the funding to hire a professional grant writer. Sometimes a friend can be really helpful and just say, hey, does this make sense? Is this clear? And do you have any questions left over? So now let's look at an example of this elevator pitch that is better. So this is if you're on the sheet, the little second paragraph on your paper. So this I rewrote as a better example. So we'll just read through this. So IRIS is a 501c3 that was established in 1990 to serve Black youth ages 10 through 18 in the South Seattle neighborhoods of Tukwila, Renton, and Highline. We have served 7,000 youth whose families live at or below the poverty line, and 90% of youth we serve are East African immigrants. So again, this is taking up about the same amount of space that the first example was, but you can see how much different the language is because it's all super specific. We know now exactly who IRIS is serving. They're East African immigrants, they're youth, their families are living at or below the poverty line. We know where, they're in South Seattle. And so, so same amount of space, really same amount of words, but lots more detail. Our after-school sports program offers free soccer, culturally representative mentorship, and tutoring in math, writing, and science. Staff and tutors are fluent in English, Arabic, and Somali, the languages most commonly spoken by our service population. So this is so much more specific, right? So in the last example, it said that they just offer after-school sports programming. So now we know exactly what that means. They do tutoring in math, writing, and science. It's multilingual, and they also play soccer. So much more specific. 75% of participating youth stay out or get out of gang activity. 85% have a decrease in the number of missed school days, and 90% graduate from high school. So something that I want to point out here is that it really makes your argument a lot more compelling to talk about statistics. So remember in the first example, what it said was, it was something very vague, right, about improving academic performance or improving school attendance. And we didn't really know what that means. But here we see 85% of students have had a decrease in the number of missed school days. And so this is really impactful to share these kinds of statistics, and something I would encourage you to do, no matter what your organization type is to start tracking statistics. Yes? What this questioner is asking is, how do organizations know, like when folks are applying, whether or not their numbers are real or made up? I think that there's a level of trust involved. It is a good question. I mean, you're right. So I think that there is, a level of trust where if you are submitting a grant, the funder assumes that the information that you're submitting is accurate. I think that the more you can show those statistics, if you have, maybe stories of students, like personal stories of students who have been successful in the program, just collecting all the data and statistics and information that you can, to help back up. But I think there is, just a level of trust that what you're putting in your grant report is accurate. Collecting data is definitely a best practice. Even if you've never done this before, it's never too late to start. You can start today. So, there are, depending on your organization type, there's all kinds of different ways that you can track data, right? So if you are working in homelessness services or providing rental assistance, these kinds of things, there's maybe case management software that your business might be using. If you're a small business owner, maybe you're tracking your expenses, tracking the number of people who come in, tracking the number of people who frequent your business, just keeping track of all of that stuff, and making sure that you have, your spreadsheets, have everything saved, where you're inputting your data. Is there anything you want to add to this, Angela?
Yeah, so I think, this is just an elevator pitch, and I think, there's a level of trust on the grant reviewer, and so, it depends on what you're trying to tell them. And I think, this example, if you have a chance to talk to people, there's power in storytelling. And if you say, we serve primarily Black youth in probably what we think is more South King County, potentially, right? And everybody knows, if you look around, that's a tough neighborhood. And most of those youth go on to college, right? We make sure they have a good meal, their tummies are full. So people really respond more to the story and something that creates a feeling. And so I wouldn't pepper this too much with data because that doesn't necessarily drive people. 90% of youth we serve, I mean, it does say 7,000, but 90% could be maybe you have 2 people and you served 1, right? So the numbers might be skewed a little bit, but nobody's really going to quiz you on that. What they're looking for is impact. And so this statement here should create curiosity in your writing, in your introduction, so they want to learn more and lean in. This is not the whole grant, right? Too bad, right? That'd be great. So this is just to pique interest. And grant writing is also about, answering questions. And so if this is the first glance of an organization, does this make you lean in and want to learn more? Right? I hope so, because you might have questions like, ooh, tell me more. And that's what the rest of the grant is for. And so, again, grants are storytelling, and the more you can convince somebody that your need is important and you're serving, folks that need what you do, and you're making impact, right? So data does drive decisions. To Ariana's point, please track what you do, right? And we were called to work with so many groups that serve so many high need areas, and they're so passionate about the work, but they forget to document what they've done each day. And so by the time we get to write the grant, we've forgotten what we do. And if we get the grant report and grant, we really forgot what we do because that grant report's due every year. Like, what did we do the past 11 months? So data drives decisions, so please track, but storytelling also drives decisions. The more you can create testimonials, have youth speak for how they benefited from your program, the more likely you're going to get funded. Did that help?
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for adding that. And I think something Angela touched on too is important, like how there's multiple kinds of numbers here, right? So we do know that there's 7,000 youth. And so, yeah, as you said, like it could be 1 out of 2 if we didn't have that 7,000 number. So yeah, so I think more things like that, so don't just use percentages, have that total, that full number in there as well. So that can also help add clarity. Any other questions about that? Yeah, testimonials are wonderful to use, and there's always usually a place to work them in. And every grant is different. Every single grant you're going to apply for is going to be different. So it's not going to be, there might not be a question that says, what have students said about your program, but more than likely there's a question where you can work in those testimonials. So yeah, and that's another great thing that you can start to track and record and have on hand.
Yeah, and to build on that, so we're starting to see like funders take notice of really cool stuff. So and youth love this, right? They're great with technology. So if they can record a little video of what they've done and in their words, that's powerful. And that little video can be linked out to your grant application. Say, you want to learn more? Let's get to know each other. And also, we recently had conversations with Virginia Mason, who's a really big funder in the area, and they really want to address social determinants of health factors to help people thrive. And when they talk about what they're looking at for their grants when they review, they want to know the impact of that work. So maybe you're providing meals to the community on Sunday. They love that. But they want to know how you feed Mary, right? Why does Mary come every Sunday to get a meal from you? And how does Mary interact with folks that she's sitting next to? What's her favorite food? Does she go home hungry? Does she come back every week? Is Mary seeming a little bit better? Maybe less meds? She's more engaged? So they really want to know how your work makes impact at the individual level. So don't think that's just something everybody does it because they don't. They just give you stats, like we feed 1,000 people every month. Okay, good, great. But how does it help somebody, right? So the more you can make those stories relatable, funders are really looking for that. And when you want to know, why would they pick your grant over somebody else's grant, is because you're showing impact in that writing and results, right? And you're also being frugal with the money and stretching your dollars. So those testimonials are super important, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's going to be a differentiator between most grants and your grant.
We've talked a bit more big picture here. We've kind of gotten more into things you might put into a full grant proposal, but I want to bring our focus back in just a little bit to thinking about, just how we shape our writing in this elevator pitch, or just for really specific things. So I want us to do one group exercise together, and then you'll have an opportunity to practice writing your own elevator pitch. So again, let's think about what we were talking about previously with being really specific about your writing. So an example sentence, so our tutoring improves academic performance. So what's wrong with that sentence? Or not wrong, but what's less great than it could be about that sentence? Very limited, yeah. Okay, so a way that might be improved, we could say our program provides one-on-one tutoring services to at-risk youth ages 10 through 8 in math and reading for 2 hours after school, 4 days a week. This targeted approach has led to a 20% increase in grade point averages among participants over the past year. What do you think? Did you learn more from the second example than from the first? So let's do one together. So the example is, our organization supports low-income families in our community. So how do we revise this together? So, this can be hypothetical. You don't have to you could talk about your organization if you want. The question is, how do we take the sentence and make it more informative? So how do we make sure that if somebody reads, our organization supports low-income families in the community, how do we make sure the person reading that doesn't have questions left over at the end? So, does anybody want to share? I think that everything you just said is good. So I think what you need is the because. So why? So, you could say something like when immigrants and refugees are coming from these countries, they may not have any family members in the area. They don't yet have an understanding of the English language. They are unable to get employment because there are language barriers. I think for you, it's really just, when we talked about earlier, the word because is your friend. So just, remember the word because. So say that, this population needs support because they feel isolated, because they don't have family, because they are not yet financially stabilized, because they have just come to this country and they may not have a job yet. So just, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. So another thing I really stress a lot with grant writing is that, you don't need to feel like you need to be really fancy or wordy. I think from all these descriptions we've seen so far, something you might notice is that they are, it's really just plain language. There's no like really big words or anything fancy. So I think that when you're thinking about what to say, just be really clear and just say why, just the reasons why this is needed. So Angela is going to be a scribe for us. So let's go back to this example of our organization supports low-income families. So how can we revise this particular sentence to make it stronger? So, and this can be hypothetical examples.
So we all know the first sentence, our organization supports, and then we changed it, and serves individuals and immigrants from Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. We provide homemade ethnic food and ethnic languages and speak ethnic languages to reduce isolation for these low-income families in our community. We also provide childcare and English language support. This creates a less stressful transition. So see, and this exercise, I know grant writing sometimes is like a blessing and a curse, but just this conversation, even though like over in this session or at the dinner table, can help you really think through the who, what, where, when, why, all those questions. And now I'm intrigued. I'm like, oh my gosh. So if my curious ears, I'd want to know numbers again. How many families? Like, you do 24/7 childcare. I think, how many kids are you serving? And so I feel like this intrigues me, and then I want to learn more, and that's where you can overlay your data, right?
Yeah, so thank you so much for doing that, Angela. And I think the next slide may help us here. So this, so I think it is helpful to think of it a bit like a formula, So these are all the pieces that you want to include. So, this is something that you can start working on just to kind of get your ideas down. It doesn't have to be anything formal, but so you want to think about who will benefit from your program. So in this case, who is benefiting is immigrants, children of immigrant families. So these are the components of, I guess you could call it a formula, or really just things that if you have these things written down, the who, what, who, where, what, how, and then we'll get to the ask in a minute. But if you kind of just write these things down in advance, this can help you, because then when you're working on grants, you can say, okay, these are all things that I know I need to incorporate. So we've got the who. So where will the beneficiaries of your program be located? Are there certain neighborhoods, zip codes, etc.? What does your program offer? So in this example, the program offers hot food, it offers meals, it offers childcare and language support. So that's the what you're offering. And then how does your program or effort or business or organization change things? So how do people's lives become better as a result of your work. So I think we got that a bit in that example. It smooths the transition, right? So people's lives become better because they're supported in 2 languages, and so this gives them a smoother transition into living in this country. And so then the ask is going back to our elevator pitch or need statement. What are you requesting? What do you need? How much for what program? How many people is it going to serve? So again, thinking about those specifics. So I'm thinking now, I'm realizing that it's already 7, so I'm not sure if we're going to have time for everybody to do an example on their own. So I think we have a couple options. If we want to take a few minutes for folks to write out, I guess let me hear from you guys too. What would be helpful? We can keep going through the presentation. We can take a few minutes. Do you want to take a stab at doing some writing here? Would you rather do some writing at home? Does anybody have a preference?
So I'll be the commercial interruption here. So yes, a lot of people give money. And if you're looking for grants, they're looking at impact, like what is your work going to do for my dollars? So Virginia Mason is really interesting. They want to help invest in the community. They give it different levels. So if you're having an event, they often give sponsorships, and that's open throughout the year. They're usually about $5,000 or less. So check out their website. They also have an annual competition where they're going to provide, and you have to have partners for this, between $20,000 to $100,000. And you're required to have 2 partners if you're the applicant. So they want you to team up. And that is related to their healthcare priorities. So they will tell you what those are on their website. They also have smaller requests that they can support throughout the year. And this is a good deal for them. For folks that are actually looking at capital investments, so maybe you're looking for property, or you need a building, or you need something big, right? They have a bridge loan program with low interest up to $1 million. So if you need some money, some moolah, and you're going to help improve your community's health or create this sense of belonging, check them out. They're really trying to transition just from a healthcare to actually investing in community to keep people healthy in their community and at home. So, and they're really open to tell us how to get your money, right? And so they'll come and talk with you. They also provide grant writing workshops and other resources. So to your question, are there more? Yes. So check out Group Health, which might be the Inatai Foundation now. Look at Kaiser. Look at Multicare. So all your big hospitals have foundations, and often insurers also have foundations. So I would sniff out the money to see if it relates to some of your work. So you would be looking for if you're looking for Multicare example, you'd be looking for Multicare Foundation grants, and just use those 3 words. For your Google search, and then see what they come up with. If you're insured for Blue Cross Blue Shield or Regents, they have foundations. They give out money. So most entities that are larger have a foundation component. And so that's a good way. And we'll be going through future presentations to tell you how to sleuth out all of this, because the Google is sometimes not your friend, right? Yeah, I would say CPR training grants, Federal Way, King County, Washington State. I would look at the American Red Cross and see what they give out, and also maybe some local fire stations and other things give out. And look for emergency preparedness or emergency response grants. So keywords, and then we'll get into this in future sessions, are going to be your friend as well.
Yeah, so next week, I would encourage you, if you're interested in this, our presentation next week is going to be all about grant finding. How do you find grants? So this same place, same time, next Thursday, we'll be here to give you a whole hour and a half about that. So
and because I'll be here with Ariana, and I get bored easily, as you can see. If you have your 150-word elevator pitches you want to bring by, I will edit for you and give you feedback and email it on the spot. So
that's a great idea.
Yeah, you can come a little early. You can email us. We can schedule some time, because it's always good to have feedback, and make sure we cover the who, why, where, what, and ask. Okay? All right.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Angela. Great idea. All right, okay, so we're gonna skip past this one for now. As Angela said, write up your 150-word pitch and bring it back next week. That'll be exciting. Okay, so our last segment of the presentation is thinking about a project plan. So the idea behind that first, the elevator pitch or the needs statement is, just really to be more general, to figure out how to articulate your organization, the work that you're doing, all of that stuff. So this next part is really more geared towards thinking about an actual project that you might submit for a grant. So perhaps, who here, raise your hand, who's here heard of SMART goals or SMART outcomes? Okay, so a couple people. So this is kind of a way to, it's an acronym. So SMART, S stands for specific, M stands for measurable, A is achievable, R is relevant, and T is time-bound. So a lot of times this relates to, people will use this to relate to outcomes or goals for a program, but I think that a helpful way to think about it is to actually think about expanding it to your whole project plan, not just your goals, but how can your plan for your project meet all of these things. And I like to add an E onto the end, which is not original to me. Maybe you've seen this other places, but SMART E. So the E stands for equitable. So we'll go through these a little bit. So again, and the purpose of this is to describe an actual project that you're trying to get grant funding for. So specific, you would talk about what your project would accomplish. Exactly, would there be 100 meals served? Would there be 20 kids given scholarships? Would there be training for 50 folks for CPR? So specific, how many people would be served? What would be accomplished? Measurable is, how are you going to measure the success of your project? And so again, this is where it's good to have a process for tracking your data so that you can measure it and talk about whether or not you met your goals. So if you're not tracking how many people you're giving training for, then you're not going to be able to then, provide this information. Achievable. So what do you need? So yes, everybody can have a big vision, everybody can want to do something big, but how are you going to achieve that? What specific resources? Do you need another staff person? Do you need a contractor? What do you need to achieve your goals? The R is relevant. So why does your project matter? How does it fit into the bigger picture? This again goes back to what Angela was talking about earlier with the impact. What is the impact that you're making? Time bound, what are the time constraints? So is your project going to take a year to complete? Is it going to take 6 months? And then the E for equitable, does your project address inequity, oppression, or injustice, or serve marginalized communities? Many times the answer is probably yes, so being able to articulate that can be part of your project plan. So I'll pause there. So we've got some examples here of what that would look like. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay. So again, this is, these are just some examples of what this could sound like. So this is a more sort of small business oriented example. So for your S, for your specific, so establish a business incubator that will support 50 local entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities, including women, minorities, and low-income individuals who want to launch or grow a business. The incubator will provide resources such as mentorship, business training, and access to funding opportunities. So that tells somebody specifically what you want to do. You want to support 50 entrepreneurs who are trying to launch or grow their business. So measurable, so you could say you might want to target 35 businesses getting launched, creating 100 jobs, and increasing the revenue of participating businesses by 20%. So those might be how you would measure your goals. So achievable, how are you going to do this? So in this example, Their organization has existing partnerships with local business associations, financial institutions, and experienced entrepreneurs who can provide mentorship and training. And then grant funding is going to be used to cover the cost of, I'm not sure what the bottom says, and seed funding for the business. Sorry about that. But when you get the slides, that part should be gone, so you can read that as well. All right, relevant. So why? Why is this important? In this example, our city's population includes 25% immigrants or refugees, many of whom are seeking living wage employment. By fostering entrepreneurship in the marginalized communities, the incubator would contribute to economic development, reduce unemployment, and promote innovation. So more of the bigger picture. Time bound. So the project will be executed over 18 months, with the first 6 months dedicated to planning, outreach, and recruitment, followed by a 12-month incubation period where participants receive ongoing support. And then how is this equitable? It addresses economic inequity by providing targeted support to entrepreneurs who have historically been excluded from business development resources, and it helps to bridge the gap in economic opportunity and promote diversity in the local business ecosystem. So as you can see, this kind of draws on everything we've been talking about so far, just about being really specific about what you are doing and what you are trying to accomplish. So things to consider is that you may not have all of that information completely solidified before you want to apply for a grant, but you do want to have a lot of stuff solidified, because you may not be ready to apply for a grant if you can't answer some of those questions yet. So for example, if you don't know how much the project that you want to do is going to cost, you might not be ready to apply. If you don't know exactly what you want to provide or how you're going to accomplish it, you might not be ready to apply, because you really need to be able to articulate those things to really flesh out your grant application. So those are good questions to ask yourself, and I would also encourage you to do that as a take-home exercise. That'll be a little later in the slides, but to also, think through that. So earlier in the workshop, you all jotted down a few needs that you had. So there were needs such as training and payroll and staffing and things like that. So I would encourage you to, when you go home, just take that need that you talked about and then figure out how many of these points can you talk about? How many of these can you fill out? Do you know exactly what you need to fulfill that need? Do you know how much the training would cost? Do you know how many people need to receive childcare? All of these things. So again, this can just help you prepare and know that you're ready to actually do an application for a grant. And there may sometimes be multiple steps of a project. If you have a really big project, if you are building an entire building or something like that, you may need to plan for it. There are also grants that exist for planning projects and for studies. So rather than actually executing the work, you may need to do some planning first. And so that's kind of a different category of grant that exists. And so maybe if you find that you're not ready to answer those questions and you say, oh, I don't know how much this is going to cost or what I need exactly, you may need to step back, do some research, or maybe even do, if it's a bigger project, more of a planning process. And so these are things that can help make your grant stronger when you do put the applications in, to have all of this stuff really nailed down. So the other writing exercise, as I mentioned, is to draft your own SMART project plan. So I think it would also be great if you folks want to work on that, when you go home, and then next week, Angela could review those as well, perhaps, if time allows. So let's see. All right, so I think that's our last slide, which is great because that gives us about 15 minutes for questions and whatnot. So we are here and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. It could be related to this presentation, or if you just have questions about grants in general, let us know. What would you guys like to ask?
So there are grants out there for every type of entity. but a good observation there. Most grants are available for nonprofits, right? But there's also a lot of nonprofits, so it's pretty competitive. So if you're looking for small business grants or other opportunities, look for like the Small Business Administration. This is a great time to be a small business too, because the Biden administration, there's a lot of flow down money for small businesses. And also banks. So banks are required by law to give out monies. I would ask your banking institution what grants they give and who they give them to. Do they give them to entrepreneurs and small business owners? Do they give them to nonprofits? And how can you get some of their money? So for small businesses too, you want to be following folks that give out money. Now, they also give out training. Hello Alice. Hello Alice is a network that you can just sign up for. They're going to ask you some questions and then recommend some things. Maybe you need a website. Maybe you need a better credit card or a bank. But after you go through their registration process, they also provide grants. So dig around on their site. They provide grants to restaurants, entrepreneurs, BIPOC-led businesses all across the country. They have like what they call the American Dreamer Award that they give out quarterly. So follow their money. Who else funds small businesses? Comcast, Verizon. So again, use that power of Google. Look for Comcast grants, Verizon grants. And again, they'll require a sign up. They also give out free training. And once you've gone through some of their training modules, then you're eligible to apply for grants. And these grants might be smaller or bigger depending on what you need. So, WorkSource Central. Are you trying to hire people? How do you get money to hire and train people? Look at WorkSource Central, WorkSource Washington. They are especially prioritizing businesses led by diverse folks, veterans, people of color, women. And did you know in Tacoma, so south of here, 20 minutes, right? There is the state entity of the Minority Business District Association, MBDA. Go visit them, 747 Market Street. They need to get to know you. What happens when you make an appointment? They will tell you everything you need to know for your business. The other thing, if you are a business doing business in Washington State, you've been around for about 3 years, look at the OMWBE registration and certification. That's through the state. If you are a women-led business, a minority-owned business, a disadvantaged business, right? All this alphabet soup, you may qualify. What does that do? That's free to you. You have to go through the process, but that gives you extra brownie points. So oftentimes businesses can go in for procurement or solicitations. Let's say you have the best food service around and you want a catering contract. If you have that OMWBE certification, you get brownie points. So businesses, cities, towns, universities have to contract with certain folks, right? They have to contract with a percentage of minority-owned businesses, women-led businesses, disadvantaged businesses. Don't take it personally. It's a rating. It's not me. So register and follow up. Now, you're like, ugh, that's a lot for, tonight, about 7:15. Also, look at the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, PTAC. That's another Washington State resource. They have free counselors that you can get assigned to, and you say, how do I go get all this money? And they will tell you. The other way to get money or to get mentorship is SCORE. SCORE is a free business mentorship program, and they can also match you with somebody to help you go through the steps of, how do I get this done? Also, counties, cities might have business accelerator programs that offer grants and training. Look for them. So there are out there, and we can go into that more next week on how to find that money. Question? You'll get slides, and you can reference them. They'll also be on a website, I believe, with the City of Federal Way archived if folks missed this presentation. And we're not a one-and-done type team, and so if you have questions, because I'm like that, believe it or not, I have questions. It marinates, and I'm like, oh, darn it. So please reach out. We are here to answer your questions, provide resources, and it is a little harder to get grants as a small business, but they are out there, and it's fun to get the money when it comes in.
And if you can see it, our contact information is up on the screen here. A couple ways to get in touch with us.
And then we're also supporting the City of Federal Way to get grants, right? So there's, like I said, grants for every type of entity.
Yeah.
Another strategy we can talk about next week is how to get more money. So oftentimes we find public-private partnerships, small businesses and nonprofits working together. That intrigues funders. So if you have friends, going in together might help you get more money and do bigger projects. So we can talk about strategies as we go through these sessions.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you all so much for being here, and we hope to see you next Thursday. There's flyers on the table, so yeah, this is just to do one last plug. It is a series, so we've got 2 more. Next week is about grant prospecting, looking for those grants, and then we'll have one final grant session the week after that. So Angela and I will be here for both of those, and then we'll have 3 more that are about fundraising. So fundraising more like, not grants are a type of fundraising, but other types of fundraising, having events, getting sponsors, things like that. So that won't be me, that will be somebody else. But yeah, so please, these are all free, so come and get more information.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.